Hey guys, thank you for coming to the show. I am sorry for all the technical glitches on the way in here. We're trying out a brand new audio interface, and Dodger apparently has decided he wants to make his presence known downstairs. I'm getting a flag off here. Let's see what's going on here on the chat. Andy says bad echo. Okay. Let's see what we can do. Pardon me. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. All right, yeah, we and we also have a start the show macro, which apparently went a little crazy. So behind the scenes, what's going on here? We had been fighting a chittering noise. It's just digital, the whole thing. And I was trying to think, how do I solve this without blowing like $1 quadrillion for a new audio interface? Because I don't know if you've noticed things, but tech stuff is really expensive these days, whether it's coming from abroad or not. And so I was trying to solve this problem for less than $3,000, and I decided the answer was to get a newer version of the Scarlett audio interface that we did right here. And I spent probably about 3 hours playing with it, and I was really, really happy with it as far as being able to dial down the noise and get a really clear signal. And unfortunately, before the show, I decided let's make sure we prep for the whole thing. And it said, oh well, you've got 2 different versions of the Focusrite software installed. You got the one for the current software, and you've got the old one. I thought, well, I'll clean things up. I'll uninstall the old one. And apparently, when I installed the old one, it took a whole lot of stuff with it. So thank you to everyone for hanging out here. Thank you to Greg Hecht, our producer here, for helping me troubleshoot through this one. And thank you for the fine folks over at Focusrite for making it so I can hear myself on any level on this whole thing. And hopefully at this point it sounds okay for y'all. Anyway, comments on the whole thing. Okay, so I get heavy echo, then I get battery, yep, echo, weird, whoa, echoes. Okay, so hopefully we are good at this point. So if not, I guess scream into the chat and I will see it. But anyway, so let's get on with things. Let me get my show notes up here because I've had to do about 4 restarts. And because we got a lot of cool stuff going on, and I do want to tell you about it. So yes, welcome again, the best produced show on the entire internet. I know you're proud to be part of this technical masterpiece that we create every week here with your help. And anyway, before we get going here, Mike Beam says better. Oro says a little tinny here, and so forth. I think we're just going to have to roll with it for the moment. As far as sound quality on the whole thing. The one thing I was really trying to do is get rid of that digital noise. And at least in my own headphones, I sound okay. But yeah, we'll iterate as we go. All right, so Brian Stewart in the house, tags and titles. Let's see what neat trick I need to learn from today's stream. Yeah, Brian, you were a big part of the today's stream, whether you know it or not. Let's see, Orovia, who's joining us from Minneapolis, from pleasant 50-degree Minneapolis. Mike Beam in the house. Our producer, of course, was with us. Robbie Weinberg is good to see. Barbara Gordon is a librarian again, pushing the book cart around. Green Bay, Wisconsin. Brian Price is here. User W2, whoever, from Roseville, California. Welcome, user WX2. Jet City Comics and so forth. Tyler Teese from Selkirk, New York, everyone. Anyone I missed, I apologize, everyone, but thank you. And let's get down to it. Yeah, definitely tinny, but not bad. No problems hearing what you're saying. Okay, so we'll work with it for now, and we'll take it from there. Anyway, so here's what's going on back in our world, other than the fun audio issues we've had here and the internet cut we took in our area on Monday. It's funny because over the weekend we just put in our backup power generator switch up setup. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, we have hot swap equipment ready for every aspect of everything we do at this point, including the power company. I think what could possibly go wrong? And our ISP decided, well, if we scrambled your modem settings after recovering from our own outage for 4 hours, that would do it. But anyway, we're doing our best to bring you this quality every week here, including all the other stuff. But anyway, so what else is going on for us? They opened up an In-N-Out down the street from us. Very, very excited. The ex-Californian here is over the moon. I've had my first 2 doubles since leaving California, and that was absolutely fantastic. In-N-Out World headquarters actually down the street about a mile from my house. And they've moved out of the Golden State for music. Well, I guess just outside of Music City. But anyway, that is a great time for me. In ComicBase news, which is what you guys actually came here. Yeah, I also had a note to self. Yes, since nothing else was going on in the world, we may as well get some work done on comic books. Yeah. So in comic book world, we have getting close to the next big round number, 1.2 million for comic pictures. And so, as is the case with these things, I tend to nerd out engineer brain whenever we are getting into these kind of situations. And what I do is I'm like, well, I can't say we have over 1.2 million pictures if some of them are actually orphan pictures left over from old title renamings or thumbnails that are no longer applicable because of different variant configurations, etc. So I made sure that we actually did a full library clean, which we do probably every year or two. It takes an enormous amount of time. And to make sure that every picture has a comic that's currently in the database that goes with it. And we did, as a result, lose about 2% of the pictures that were in our database. So we were like 3,000 away from the 1.2 million mark, and now we're 22,000 away. But at the rate that we're going, we're adding about 7,000 pictures a week. We should be there quite soon. Now, not all those 7,000 pictures are brand new pictures. A lot of them are updates and upsizings and better pictures of pictures we already have. But again, just an absolute flood of content. I'm very, very happy with everyone who's contributed to that, and thank you so much for everyone. But anyway, the other thing that's been going on, as you probably saw, is we took something like 32,000 submissions over the weekend for new content and so forth. We have had a absolutely flood, onslaught, deluge. The words do not easily come to mind for how much content we've been coping with lately. We are, at this rate, we're getting halfway close to 1.5 million comic books in the database. We're adding those at the clip of around 10,000 a week, as well as pulp magazines and so forth, which we've had our own staffers really going to town on adding that stuff in. One of the things we do is we get information from Heritage Auctions, and they started doing pulp auctions. And I decided, hey guys, instead of having everything be a revelation to us every single time we get new auction data, how about if we've gone and done at least a basic index of all the pulp series of the entire era? So basically all the think about comic books like Dime Detective or Astonishing Stories and things like that, amazing stories, and everything from the 19 teens through about 1950 is the pulp era. And we are well through that entire effort. So you're going to see some amazing covers coming out this next week, also some amazing new titles popping in. And if you are a pulp fan, as I definitely am, you're going to be very stoked when you see what's coming up in the next couple of updates. So that's going on. And so we are, I think, at 1.44 million comic book covers in the database. We're nearly 4 million newspapers, 310,000 magazines, books, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we're absolutely pounding the content. So that's a thing that we've been doing. All right. So with that said, what I've been doing on the programming front is I've been focusing on actually searching for Atomic Avenue, of all things. They're actually finally getting a little bit of my attention. It's well overdue, as you guys have probably seen. But what we've done is we've actually taken the searching in ComicBase and architected it out so that when you are firing off searches, you're actually hitting a second search-only site. All it does, this brand new search site that we're doing, is handle different very complicated searches and serve up web consumable data, which then we can use for Atomic Avenue. We could use it for a future ComicBase mobile app if we wanted to do one of those, if we want to do improvements there, or anything else. And so it also gives us a chance to really revise, our thinking on how we want to let people narrow down on things that are interesting to them. So before, obviously you can do the obvious things like, if I type in Amazing Spider-Man, that's going to take you to the Amazing Spider-Man. But if you go say Avengers, right, well, then you immediately have the question of, well, which series of Avengers? There's like 12 of them now, plus all the ones that weren't just called Avengers. They're called West Coast Avengers and East, and so forth. And we want to provide people with as many interesting ways of getting to the data as makes any kind of sense. And so along with just doing basic searches for publishers and artists and writers and things like that, we want to allow people now to narrow in on what they're doing. So if I say, show me all the comics by Mark Waid, okay, now narrow that down to the comics by Mark Waid that I don't have. Or show me all the comic books by Mark Waid that cost between $5 and $10. So these are all the sorts of searches that you can now do. They're in very rough prototypical form on the Atomic Avenue website right now, but they weren't even there a week ago in terms of being able to do that kind of sub-searching. And one of the very first things that jumped out at us is our title searching, when you get into what I guess you could call collections, is not what we would want. So this brings us back to a very, very old topic, something we had from ComicBase going back, gosh, I want to say back to ComicBase 1.0, the idea of genres. So back when we first decided that we're going to try to index the entire world's comic books, we made kind of a crazy decision. We said, well, we talked to our buddies over Comics Buyers Guide and said, so we get these genre codes from Diamond in, if along with that stuff. And they'll say things like, this is an action adventure comic. This is a Western comic. This is a horror comic. But we know, because you guys indexing more comic books than we did at that time, Comics Buyer's Guide, what other genres would you guys want to see in a full list? And so we had some talks with the editorial staff over at Comics Buyer's Guide, and I guess this wasn't around ComicBase 1.0. I guess it was closer to when we first started doing our downloadable updates, was actually ComicBase 10.0, so I guess 10 years in. And we came up with a list of 22 genres that we thought were interesting. Everything from action, adventure, crime, mystery, adult, nonfiction, licensed, westerns, romances, etc., anthropomorphic. And we made sure that all the comics in ComicBase had one or more of those things checked. So you could, for instance, have a Western horror comic book. So think about Weird Western Tales. Or you might have a title like 2000 AD, which is an anthology which covers half a dozen or more different genres, everything from science fiction to to crime to whatever else. And so what we did is we basically started out at that point, I want to say ComicBase had maybe, 5,000 titles in it. And we had this lovely genre index that was attached to everything that would let you do genre searching. And we carried that forward over the next 15, 20 years. And then we got to the big redo of ComicBase. ComicBase 2017 went into ComicBase 2020. We had to fudge the year numbers for a number of years because it took us literally 4 years to rewrite the program from the ground up in a different language, in a different database environment, rethinking everything about the program. And one of the things we had a chance to rethink at that point, and this is back in 2020, is, well, genres, are they really hacking it? I mean, they were fine when we had 5,000, 10,000 titles. We currently in ComicBase have almost 80,000 titles, different series. And if you add up all the magazines and pulps and things like that, it's a number closer to 90 or 100,000. And if you're browsing through the section of your bookstore and you sit there and you only have 22 different sections to go from, the superhero genre alone is like 6 floors of the bookstore. It's not enough to get you where you're going if you're trying to pull things out that way. So we thought, well, okay, look, the genre thing clearly isn't going to scale the way we want. And then we thought, well, what would? And we really came to the idea that you have to be able to make up your own tags, your own ideas, because people get very, very specific about things that they really love. I mean, I can get, if you talk about music, I won't just say I like rock, right? I mean, if I said, find me an album in my collection, I'll go to the rock section. Fat freaking chance. I mean, I'll be looking for prog rock or cerebral new wave or post-punk or shoegaze, or and the layout of the land, it gets incredibly involved. And there used to be people who created diagrams of like 400 different subgenres, of different rock areas of things, and what were the bands that were emblematic of something. So, for instance, even if you're talking about funk, James Brown isn't exactly in the same school as Van Bram 3000, which is not in the same school as Parliament. They share some commonalities, but if you're really into one thing, you may not be into the other thing, and so forth. Well, same thing goes for comic books or magazines or anything else. I mean, it's not enough to say I like westerns. Maybe it is, but do you like modern westerns? Do you like neo-noir westerns? Do you like horror tinged ones? I mean, if you're a Jonah Hex fan, does that indicate that you would or would not be a fan of Dead in the West? Don't know. It's kind of interesting to see that these are both in the Western section, but it doesn't really get you where you're going. So we want to be able to give you different ways of tagging the sorts of things you want. And now, we were a little busy at the time, so we kind of came up with the architecture. We made it so you can add your own titles. We made it so you can show the tags that were associated with the series, and then we kind of let it lie. We just kind of let the ball go, because one thing that occurred to us is the tags that someone's going to put on a series are going to be very, very individual to them. It's going to be very hard to say, this is a tag. Like if I say, well, let's go straight into the hellscape of romantasy. Think Morning Glory Milking Farm, right? And if you don't know what that is, congratulations. That means you don't need the kind of mental bleach the rest of us do. But this is an actual genre. People are writing articles about people and their love of this genre, and most normies look at that and go, oh my God, what is wrong with you people? But it's a real thing. If you're into it, you're into it, and the rest of us maybe not be. But at the same time, we are into things like hard sci-fi. We care about are we talking about Asimov, or are we talking about Battlestar Galactica? It matters to us being able to put that stuff apart. Well, back here at ComicBase, we have this whole complicated situation we have to manage, which is we've got a master database, and we still have these 22 genres, which then became tags. So once upon a time, the tag that was genre number 21 became the superhero tag, and so you'll see that on series. But we didn't really know, well, how do we push these out to everyone else in the world and not get in the way of any tags that you might have put out? So let's say you're a really big manga fan, and you take a series like Vampire Miyu, right? Is it shoujo manga, which is to say girls manga? A little bit in a way. She's a girl. She's also a vampire. It's a little bit horror, and so forth. There's a lot of things that you might have put in as a tag on that whole thing, including the tag manga itself. Or maybe you just put the tag vampire. We didn't want to get in the way of any tag you'd put in. Same time, we didn't really know how to internalize tags that people might be able to send us and so forth. And so, like I say, we kind of just let the ball drop, which is to say you could tag stuff and it was all on you, right? Then we kind of got into this whole searching thing that I'm working on, where I'm working with our artists and say things like, okay, I want you to prepare carousels and different graphics for different promotions, and let's do one around Halloween. Right? Let's find Halloween comics. Now, the way we do this in the past is we would construct this really, really involved title search. We would look for titles that either had the word Halloween in them, or that they had a Halloween special, or they might say ghost in them, or they might say vampire or werewolf. And so we'd pick like a half a dozen terms like this. We'd put them all together into one big complicated search string, and we'd hope for the best. And would that get you any of the Archie spooktaculars? No, it would not. And so they would not appear on that list of, say, even like Halloween things. And this fell apart even worse. Like if we were to try to put together a special of things like, hey, let's do a spotlight on neo-noir comics. So think about things like Ed Brubaker's Criminal, or something like that. It's... Agent of Camp says, dang, Pete, just look that up. Ew, yeah, I know. Yeah, and this stuff really sells in the world of literature, which is why it came up. Anyway, but yes, we want to be able to take in genres from or tags from different people, but we've got a real project on our hands being able to say, well, what's a tag that's redundant with what we've already got? Is this a tag we want to have in the database? Once the tag's out there, how do we push it out as part of updates and so forth? And the thing that actually is driving us to kind of take this whole thing on at once is the idea that, we do want to be able to drive searches for anything based on popular tags that people have done. And so we're kind of getting to the point now where we're ready to jump in with both feet and take this whole issue on. And I just want to kind of share my thoughts on how that whole thing might work. So let's take our good friend Vampire Mew. Do you guys know who Vampire Mew is? Maybe let's take something a little bit more. Let's take something a little bit more well known. Jonah Hex, right? So. Is it a war comic? Well, a little bit, kind of. I mean, he got a scar, after the war. Is it a Western? Yeah, definitely. Is it a Western horror, or is it a Western noir comic? Definitely. Is it a supernatural comic? Quite possibly, because he definitely deals with a lot of things of that sort. And I would also think, if you want to say things like Civil War, it might not belong there too. So, if you're a big Jonah Hex fan, you might be saying, all right, I want to attach all these tags to the whole thing, and then I want to tell the people at ComicBase, these are tags that I see as belonging to Jonah Hex. So we need to make it so that there's an easy way for you to tag that stuff. Right now, you go deep into you double click on an issue, you go into the editing of the title information, and there's a big list there where you can type in different tag names. And we want to make it so it's a little easier to get there in the tag series, first of all. But that once you've tagged the whole thing, that you can send it to us, and that we can look at it and say, well, okay, not sure how we feel about the say Civil War. We don't think about that one. But the Western, the horror, definitely that makes sense. Supernatural, I'd take that one. Or maybe you want to say, DC Western, maybe there's something like that makes sense. What we want to do is we want to be able to look at that one as an editor, look at the tags and say, okay, we're seeing that term a lot. Let's make that one be an official tag that is in use for us. And you, of course, would keep all the tags that kept in yours, but anything that we had decided was part of the official canon, by looking at how people categorize things, particularly, we would then roll out into the things that we would then take in on our side. They become part of the master database, attached to the titles, and that then later on, when we push a content update, if you say, do I want to allow ComicBase to push new tags down for my titles, you would then see these appear as search tags for the items in question. So then if you were say looking at a title like DC's Jonah Hex, and you want to explore other Western supernatural titles, you could literally just click on the supernatural Western thing and see other titles that were kind of like that, and that would be kind of neat. But for us to make that all happen, we have to go through this tremendous round trip of being able to parse tags, see what's there, see what's not there, and so forth. And my thoughts on this one are largely, and I'm going to say right now, this is the sort of thing that a lot of us are kind of OCD. We like having everything squared away very neatly, like everything in its place, everything's listed exactly right, and so forth. If you are one of these folks, this whole concept is going to make your head hurt. I'm just going to say the itching in your brain is going to start, and it will never stop, because for 90,000 things, you have to think about not just how do I think of this, but how do other people think about this sort of genre. So imagine you're organizing the world's largest video store, and you've got as many shelf markers as you possibly want to call out different sections, but you do want people to be able to find the movies. Now, the good news is, unlike an actual video store, a comic book or a book or a magazine can live simultaneously in multiple sections at once. So it isn't, if I go looking for it in the supernatural section and don't find Jonah Hex there, I might find if I'm looking in the Western section, or I might find if I'm looking through the gunfighter section or something like that. All these things might apply, but it also means that there's no one clear, really obvious way to classify a different thing. And this is where we have this very complicated roll ahead of us. I mean, I go back to this. It seems like quite a naive discussion we had, and we had some length with the Comics Buyers Guide people. What were the 22 genres that were worth mentioning to cover the entire world of comic books? And that's what we came up with. Yeah. But I think what we ought to be thinking about is what are basically the top 300 or so tags that people will want to associate with all the things that we are all buzzing about, leaving open the idea that as new things emerge, there's always new trends, there's always new things like that, that we can let people easily find them by that as well. Now, so it's not going to be we all sit down there and hand down the hierarchy from on high kind of thing. That's never going to work. I can tell. I know how I organize my video collection, my comic collection, whatever else, that no two people are going to see the world exactly the same way. And it's no simple, list of 20 tags is going to handle all the work. I think what we're going to see is the people who are very invested in a particular thing will be sitting there saying, all right, so Miles Morales' Spider-Man is going to get tagged with superheroes. It probably already is. It'll get tagged with Spider-Man, and it'll probably get tagged with Miles Morales, right? And so any one of those might potentially lead you to Miles Morales Spider-Man. Obviously, the more specific the tag, the fewer other entries in the list there would be to find that way. But I think that's how it's probably going to sort of shake out. And we'll be keeping hit counts as we go of what are the tags that people use a lot. And basically we'll do the same thing that we do with artist names and writer names, is when you start typing a tag name for something or a artist name, it's going to autocomplete with known tags as we go, but it's going to autocomplete in order of what you've typed, but also arranged in order of how common the tag is. So if I type S, probably the very first thing it's going to suggest is superheroes. If I type SP, probably the most common tag it's going to suggest is Spider-Man. Or if I type IR, Iron Man, and so forth. I imagine this is how the stuff is going to shake out. And what happens, if you guys have ever dealt with sites like, what's his name, Stack Overflow, I almost want to do this one because AI more or less killed it, is you would ask questions about anything in the world that bugged you as a programmer, and you had to associate 3 tags or more with your question. So you choose the obvious ones, like what language was it in, or what was the topic. Let's say I was having trouble with a Maui-based C# barcode library. So I might say, .NET Maui might be the first one tag, C# might be a tag, and barcode scanning might be another one. But I wouldn't know, for instance, whether or not you called it barcode scanning, barcodes, barcoding, whatever else. But as soon as I typed bar, it was suggesting as an autocomplete item barcode scanning. And so I just did, okay, that's it. Hit tab and moved on from there. And that's how these things kind of congeal. Now, like I say, if you like things to be in apple pie order, completely cleaned up, completely organized, this is the sort of thing that will make your head hurt. And it's also why I think that one thing we have to do with this one is we have to add a new preference when we have content updates to say whether or not you want to allow us to change your tags, because there will be folks among us. I'm like this myself sometimes, and I know us too well, and there are people who manage libraries and massive collections and things like that. You have your own categorization system, and you don't want it changed by anyone, anyhow. Fine. Absolutely, that is absolutely, you're right. And so we will have the ability to say, no, I want nothing to do with anyone changing the categorizations of my system. But I do think the rest of us need a way to navigate the idea of 90,000 different titles. How do we pull out a list of political titles? If I want to do it, let's say it's going to be election day, coming up in America, and we want to do a feature on political comic books. How do you get things that celebrate that? I mean, how do you get us things if Martin Luther King Day is coming up? Not everything that's about Martin Luther King will have the word Martin Luther King in the title name. You might have items like March or that are relevant to the whole thing. You want to be able to pull these lists up, and so that's what we're doing with this whole effort. So that's what we're going to be. Probably it's the vague sense of how we're going to be approaching this one. Now, as you guys have probably figured out, there are a lot of moving parts on this one. And the very first thing that we'll be doing is we'll be adding some new fields to there's an invisible table in ComicBase. It's not directly visible to you guys, which associates every tag with every title in your database. And we're actually going to be extending out our basic concept of how that worked to manage many more tags than we dealt with before. But more importantly, that allows us to decide what the official tags are that we use in our ComicBase, just like we have official conditions. You're allowed to have very fine ++ as a personal condition in your database, but Atomic Avenue isn't going to recognize it, right? Because they have to deal with grading standards and grading disputes and things like that, and there's a limited appetite for people fighting endlessly about custom grading scales. But you and your own collection are allowed to do whatever the hell you want. Similarly, in your own collection, you can categorize things any bloody way you want. Just, this was something that featured the Black Widow, and I really like the Black Widow, so I'm going to put the Black Widow tag on all the things that involve Black Widow because I'm trying to collect them all. So you may decide that that's something you want to put in. We're going to be looking at the top ones people use, see how they fit with the other tags we've already accepted, and deciding what ones become the official tags that we take on. And then basically what will happen is, if you're allowing us to adjust tags as we do updates, we will be adding them into our master database, and the official tags that are part of the whole things that you don't already have will come down into your database, and you'll get those in addition to whatever tags you already had associated with the title. And when you go and you view a title, they will appear right at the top, and you'll also be able to do searching just like you can in ComicBase right now according to tag. You can say, all right, find me all the Western supernatural horror films or horror comics in my database, or find me all these Miles Morales things in my database. I do want to emphasize, when we're looking for what tags to use, I want to use tags for grouping concepts and things that aren't well represented by fields we've already got. So for instance, if we've got a field like storyline, right, War of the Gods or something like that, that's already just a storyline search. You don't need to tag the title War of the Gods with the tag War of the Gods, because it's completely redundant 15 different ways. We would not accept that as a tag. That being said, if you're talking about like what are all the Spider-Man titles, well, just like I said with Martin Luther King, not every Spider-Man title is named Spider-Man something. Not every Martin Luther King title is named Martin Luther King something. So you want to have things that add up to groups that wouldn't necessarily be easy to search for by themselves. Another thing that's a consideration is you want to have things that apply to the title as a whole, not to a particular issue. So one thing that came up with is, say, Savage Dragon, every 100 issues or so whips out some kind of political topic for an issue. I probably would not recommend flagging Savage Dragon as politics as a tag in the comic book, unless you really believe there's way more political content than I've certainly seen. That being said, if you wanted to talk about the different types of horror comic books, you want to talk about things that were, shock horror, or supernatural horror, or devils or monsters or things like that, those make perfectly good tags, because Werewolf by Night easily fits into the idea of monster horror, whereas it doesn't, it keeps you from having to list every single monster that could ever happen. So it leads to good searches that way. So think about like what sort of tags would allow you to find this thing easily in your own library if you were looking for it, or if you liked a particular genre of film, like say, there were a whole bunch of devil movies and like Catholic fear mongering back in the 70s. If you really like The Exorcist, what would be some other things you might like? That's the sort of thing that we're looking for in terms of our tagging. Now, what we're going to have to do on our side, in addition to making the correction loop work, in other words, being able to accept submissions from you folks and put them out as part of the weekly update, we're also going to need to adopt a couple of new things that we haven't seen in the program up until now. We're probably going to need to have a series tags menu command, which would allow you to to basically go and say, I want to apply the series tag, say, Spider-Man, and then go to a list of all the titles in the database and say, yeah, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Similarly, if you had done a publisher search for, say, Marvel, and you're looking at every Marvel title that's ever happened, going down that list, highlighting all the ones that had anything to do with the Black Widow or something, and saying, yeah, I want to take all these ones that I just selected and I'll tag all of them with Black Widow and add the Black Widow tag to all those. Those are some new functions that we're going to have to add in the program that we haven't seen before. Beforehand, the only way you would ever be able to send us data is you would make the change to your own issue. And when you send the correction to a particular issue, we would also send the title information that came along with that. But we don't want you to highlight 50,000 Spider-Man issues from around the globe and send us 50,000 corrections just so we could know that those were all having to do with Spider-Man. That makes no sense. So we're going to, first of all, we want to make that much easier to do as opposed to having to highlight 50,000 Spider-Man issues or Batman issues or Iron Man issues. But we also want to make it so that you can submit title-based corrections. So instead of saying submit new or corrected data and having it send us essentially information on the issue, we want to have it know based on what you're doing at the time. And if you're looking at a list of titles or you've just gotten done tagging things, we know at that point you're sending us information on title tags. We want to send just the title. We don't want to send all the issues because that will take all day and it will not be any fun for anybody, including our editors. So that's a new thing that has to happen, and there's some infrastructure that has to happen on our side to make that happen. The interface on this is a little challenging in parts, I'm just going to say. Because think about if you've ever highlighted a block of text in a word processor, and on some of the text it was using one font, and some of it they were using another font, and some of it was bold, and some of it was underlined, and so forth. We need to be able to say, if you make multiple selections, here's all the tags that were used anywhere in the whole thing, and the ones that are displayed in all bold thing are the ones that apply to everything in the list, and the other ones were applied to some items in the list and so forth. There's a lot of finesse that's going to need to happen on along those lines, and I'm not going to kid you, I don't have every single part of this worked out, but we do know that you do need to be able to show the tags that are related to certainly if you just highlight a single title, that's no problem, it's just a list, right? But let's say I take Spider-Man Wolverine and I take Miles Morales Spider-Man, right? So if I highlight both of those titles and I say show me the tags, you'll see Wolverine will apply to one of them, Spider-Man will apply to both of them, and Miles Morales will apply to one of them. And we need to be able to show both of those and say whether or not you want to override and make them all say Spider-Man, all say Miles Morales, etc. So there's some finessing that has to go on that one. And so, yeah, I'm not going to kid you that I've got this all entirely worked out in my head, but we do need to find a way to make it very straight. Oro Vieja says, just give me a tag for a good story well told, which can only be the top 90% quality. Who judges? Most people have when they've seen it. It's funny because we do have the idea of ratings. I've seen other people do that. The thing that is that keeps it from working is there's no feedback mechanism that forces someone to rate something. And so that's why if you take ratings on, say, your music library and things like that, you'll know the things that you might have given 5 stars to. But unless it's something that's like a really big release, depending on what you're doing, movies can get ratings from places like Rotten Tomatoes, and they can say, well, this is what everyone in here did. One thing I really like on Plex, which is what I use for storing my own movie and music collection, is you can get ratings from people like you, or people who are kind of like in your friend group and so forth. And so you can say things like, oh, okay, hey, yeah, you're a big fan of Skanking Pickle. Which of their albums did you rate highly? And that's actually kind of interesting. And if you do it really well, it can be a way of kind of building up your own kind of cred within your own group. But that being said, it worked for certain things like movies to some level. But you have to realize that, of everyone who watches something, 1 out of 10 tops is going to rate it, right? 1 out of 100 will rate it and give it more than like just a star or thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So when you're dealing with numbers like that, if you're talking about a comic book that only 100 people will ever have an opinion on, don't expect to get any meaningful amount of ratings out of it. So that's one of these things that would be great to see, but I think unless something changes in the landscape, I don't think you can directly go there with like a rating system on that, which is why also I've seen other people who've employed ratings publicly for comic books. It does not typically go particularly well. I haven't really seen one be successful. You can get people who are shilling things that they're pimping in terms of like, I'm trying to pump and dump this one title, and so like, oh yeah, 5 stars, thumbs up. But yeah, no, I understand the need. What we really want to do is say like, hey, you have similar taste to me. What kind of stuff did you like? I do think there's a way to get there at some point. Where if we build out different things in ComicBase, there's an ability to build the friend group ideas of things, to say things like, hey, yeah, this guy has similar taste to me. What are the things that he's pimped in terms of his own stuff? I wouldn't mind exploring that at a later date. This isn't part of the topic at hand, but it is an interesting thing, and I wouldn't mind going there at some point. Let's see. Steve Dazzler says, for team titles, X-Men, Justice League, etc., I hope the tags just include the team name, not every individual character in the team. Yeah, I tend to go for that one. I think what we're probably guesstimating editorially right now is that the working set of tags is going to be in the couple 300 range. In other words, we don't want to list every bloody character on there. If you want that, then you're looking for the appearances, field, which we already have. But I think that's not really, I mean, when you're saying things like, hey, I really like Punisher, right? You're not looking for every place Punisher's ever been in his entire history. You're looking for, hey, I collect Punisher titles, right? Matter of fact, you might even say things like, hey, yeah, I'm looking for Avengers titles from the 1970s, or I'm looking for Avengers titles from the 80s and something. And so by putting together the combination of a year range with a tag, you actually can get some really good searching going. So for instance, saying I want to find superheroes is way too broad. I mean, 50,000 titles come up, right? I mean, that does no one any good. Saying I want superhero titles from the 1950s, oh, that's a little bit more interesting, right? And then if you say things like, show me superhero titles in the 1950s that I can get a hold of a copy for under $10, suddenly I have a shopping list, right? Especially if I can compare that with things like that I don't already have. So yeah, no, that's the kind of behavior we want to enable with all this. So that's where we're thinking. Brian Stewart says, people ask for turfing the ratings is a complex method of getting ratings from people you follow is more realistic. Yeah, I believe that as well. Let me see here. Let me scroll back up on things here. Different comments about sound. Yeah, we'll work on the sound for next time out here. I honestly, up until about a minute before showtime, I wasn't even able to hear myself in my own headphones. So we'll fix this and we'll take another shot at it. But at least we don't have the robot noises anymore. So we're making progress here. Okay, so Pulp's picking up. Brian says, let's see. Yes, some horror about romantasy. Bar, that got my attention. Let's drink. All right, so let me see here. And I think that is about all that is of great relevance in the title, in the topics of this particular one right here. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to say it's been a bit of a day for me, so I'm going to get ready to pack this one in, unless there's anything that's really on people's mind on this one. I did want to bring this one up there, that this is something that's going to be coming down the pipe relatively quickly. Just to give you an idea of how it's going to play out. This will be probably the marquee feature of ComicBase 26.2, our next big quarterly release, which of course means that if you're interested in getting in early, drop a note here for me in pbigford at human-computing.com. I can add you to the Slack group if you're interested in getting into the sausage-making business here of watching all the internal pre-releases on the whole thing. Where it all starts is it starts with the idea of we're going to adjust your internal database so that it can make tags that are capable of being shared, that we can start aggregating what the official list is on our end, and that you can send tag information to us as part of the submissions, and then we can send it back to you as part of content updates. All of that is going to get pre-done as part of ComicBase 26. There is going to be a hard break almost certainly in the update formats between ComicBase 2026 and ComicBase 2026 version 26.2, because this necessarily involves us changing up the format of the update files. And whenever that happens, on the back end for us, what happens is we wind up having to write the format of the file in a couple different versions. We look at the version of ComicBase you're running, and we say, okay, you're running ComicBase 2025, so that one didn't have some of the publisher fields that we have in ComicBase 2026, so you get one version of the file. Everyone with ComicBase 2026 gets the other version of the file. When we're starting talking about having a third version of the file, that is going to be the time where we call hard stop on putting out things for ComicBase 2025 users who've been dawdling and haven't upgraded, even though you're entitled and it's free in your account. If you've been dawdling and you haven't upgraded to ComicBase 2026 yet, when we put this out into the wild, that will be a hard stop on. You won't be seeing any more ComicBase 2025 format updates, because we can't be wasting the extra half an hour it takes to push out every single time we do an update. So yes, definitely part of what you do when you buy ComicBase is you get a year's worth of update subscriptions. When that comes out, when a new version drops, we very much mean for you to upgrade to the new version of the software. Coming up on 6 months that the ComicBase 2026 has been out, every week I still deal with people who say, hey, I'm having trouble with some issue that's having to do with last year's version. And my answer to them is always, all those times we said, please upgrade, we mean it. Just internet, check for updates, and when it says there's a new version of ComicBase 26 out, would you like to update now? The answer is yes. You want to do this now, because anyway, in a fairly short period of time, there won't be any new content updates for the older versions of ComicBase 2025. So please, if you're still dawdling out with ComicBase 2025, download the current version, please. If you have any questions, call us at 408-266-6883. We're happy to hold your hand and get you going, but we need to get you on the current version, because we can't keep supporting the old versions forever, because it takes an enormous amount of time, and we already have a lot on our plate. All right, with that said, we will be rolling out the new version to people on the internal track probably in the next week or so. We'll start seeing things like that, and then we can test the facility for pushing updates up, down, sideways. That'll be an early bird version of ComicBase 26.2, which will roll out internally after we feel like that is all good to go and the whole process is working well, and we start to populate it with a decent amount of stuff. At that point, then we'll put it into general release, and that will be our big second quarter release. So look for that one coming in the weeks and months ahead. And yeah, I actually think this is actually pretty interesting stuff, because I really love it because it gives me an easier way to find stuff that's cool to me. So again, I really love neo-noir, right? Think about films like Lone Star, or just it's completely blanking out because I immediately went back to Sam Spade. But think about any of the more modern versions of the Gumshoe Detective and things like that. Love that stuff. And there isn't like a really easy way of saying, hey, I really like this sort of thing. Where would I find titles like that? You just kind of have to know. And this allows us to surface that sort of thing in search in a reasonable way. And I really love that. It means that we can find new things to read. It means that Atomic Avenue will find new things for people to buy, and everything makes everything better. And it is going to drive us, all of us who are OCD, it's going to make us absolutely nuts, because it is going to mean that there's a lot of ambiguity around things, and we're just going to have to roll with it. And to the extent that we feel like, well, yeah, you tagged this with this tag, but it should have had this other tag as well, you're going to need to be the one who sits there and adds that tag to the series and sends it in to us for consideration. And that's how the world gets better. But I mean, that's how we got the world to where we're at right now, with just about 6 million items in the database. I mean, our guys have been working hard like crazy for 30 some years, but we absolutely could not have done this without all of you. And the publishers are not going to be particularly helpful on this score. I don't believe Diamond isn't even in the mix anymore, but publishers like Penguin Random House and in Lunar, I don't believe even publish genre codes anymore. So even if you were interested in the very, very broad strokes of things like, you know, romance or superheroes, they don't give them to you anymore. So we're going to have to be the ones who, you know, make all this stuff happen. So it's going to be kind of a weird collaborative, mushy effort to make it all happen. But I still think we're going to check in on this one in a few months and be like, wow, there's a lot of neat ways to find new cool stuff now. So that's how, my guess is how it's all going to work, and we'll take it from there. My voice is going, so I'm going to spare the announcements for right now. Please read them in the chat. Basically, hit the like and subscribe if this is the sort of thing you like, if you like it, because we will try to do more things like that, and we'll try to work out our audio issues for next time. So thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.